2002 to 2004. Yeah, it was yeah. Just saying.
And I was just trying to remember, you were doing an interesting combination of subjects.
I was doing French, media, film, drama, scooch of graphic design for 1 year.
That's right.
I ditched that, and then I came back for a farewell tour to get an English A level in. I did it in about 5 months, I think, just because I had decided I wanted to pursue that at university. So
that's what I was trying to remember, because Xander did film with me in a year, having done media over 2 years, the more conventional one.
Oh yeah, I did do
You actually did the film, you just sort of added an AS on. And then you came
I
back
was a nerd already.
and did another concentrated year, which was actually 5 months long, for the literature, which was really what you pursued thereafter at university, and really has always underpinned your interests, as diverse as they are. I mean, would I be right in saying that, you know, essentially your motivation is literary? It has been.
Yeah.
When I met you, I think you'd written 3.
Yeah,
books.
I wrote some extremely crappy. That's the reason. If you are writing, I'll say this: if you are writing, don't expect to be great from day one, because the stuff I was writing when I came here, I look back and come close to throwing myself out of the window, and how god awful a lot of it is. So don't worry if it's not top of the table first time out.
Well, it's about getting it out there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Getting out there.
Well,
But you already had it out there when you arrived.
I
for A levels.
I inflicted a fair bit of it on Rick, as I remember.
You did indeed.
Rick being a drama teacher,
teacher.
who I believe is long since gone.
Yeah, Rick has moved on. Yes.
He was
Still wasn't keen. Yeah.
I'll annoy him afterwards.
That's an idea. So yeah, so I suppose what I'm saying is Xander has very much trod his own path, but it's picked up on a lot of diverse areas. But the one for me that's the key one is writing, that even when it came to seeing a storyboard that Xander had done, there were just loads of writing ideas in there. And I'll give you one anecdote if I can bore them with just one.
This could be one that's actually going in a book.
It might be.
It's the one I'm thinking, is it the storyboarding one? That may involve birds?
Oh, I know the storyboarding one.
Oh, okay, no, carry on.
Working with Xander was always interesting, because there was always these creative ideas coming out of nowhere, and we were trying to put together an idea for a film intro for media. And Xander said, I was reading this interview with Hitchcock, where he said he thought he could just about work out any plot, but this one had always stumped him. He wanted to start a film with a dead body in a boot coming off a car assembly line intact, but he couldn't quite work out how you could get that to work. So Xander said, I think I've worked it out. I said, well, that's great. That would be a great way to start a film intro for a media studies A-level project. That sounds okay. He said, there's only one problem, right? It's got to be in Siberia. Well, let's just shelve that problem for the moment.
But then it snowed that Christmas.
2 days later, the snow came down.
Gods were smiling on my creative endeavours.
Buried somebody in the Giles.
Giles, locked in a boot.
Exactly. So I've always taken from that if you've got the creativity, you can get there.
It doesn't often snow in Cambridge, for people who local know that. So
and then I was appointed director and threw a tantrum and got full gale force Scotsman.
Oh, you remember that bit as well? Yeah, that was the bit I was hoping you might have forgot. Yeah.
In other words, don't get pretentious.
So, I think I'll leave you with the floor, and I don't know whether you guys want to ask him some questions, or whether you want to give an account of your work. Freestyle it? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
I have always been known for my freestyling.
Right, welcome to Ambler.
So yeah, as you probably gathered, my name's Xander. I was at CCSS from 2002, 2004, doing various of Charlie subjects. And then I went to uni at Exeter. I studied English and film and worked on student newspaper and just generally screwed around as you do at university. After that, it's been quite a lot of sort of freelance stuff, but the sort of main thing that I've achieved or aiming to do for the future is writing novels. As you can probably tell, I've also done some sports journalism, film criticism, video games journalism, a bit of all sorts of things. So as I said, I'm rather hoping to get sort of lead from you guys of what you're interested in, or what you want to hear about, what I can help you with, if anything, or just amuse you with embarrassing anecdotes about Rona.
Oh no, there's too many of those. Some questions.
Any ideas? Yeah?
How did you come up with a topic?
Well, for the sort of books, things like that.
Not just the books, like, where do you kind of get inspiration from? Do you kind of just tip it off the top of your head, it comes to you randomly, or is it more you have a goal in mind and then you kind of develop it around that?
Well, a lot of what you'd hear at university, certainly the course in Exeter I was doing, was that they'd say that you should plot out story ideas and novels in certain ways. Take notes all the time and just sort of see what comes from that. I've always found that the stuff that I write that I really feel passionate about and want to develop is the stuff that have sort of come naturally out of my own interests. So the sort of major project that I'm hoping to do as a long-term thing is a series of sort of 8 novels, which has a lot to do with, I grew up as a massive James Bond nerd and enjoy some history and things like that. So it grew, funnily enough, a conversation with an English teacher at CCSS about the Iliad and the Odyssey, and about sort of the role of the hero in sort of Greek mythology, and then combining that sort of, the hero figures we have today in terms of James Bond or other action films, and they kind of came together. And I was thinking about how that's changed over time, and that's sort of the general theme of the books I'm writing. So I think that it's different for everyone, in that there are some people, I'm sure, for whom that very structured approach of doing scene 1, right, is that, scene 2, we'll do this, scene 3, we'll do that. But for me, I think it comes out a lot of finding out who you are, what your interests in life are, and what you want to, what interests you have that you want to explore in your work, if you like. And then from there, get ideas for characters who represent certain things or can act in certain ways that will then carry on into a full-scale action thriller. But yeah, so as I said, it depends a lot on the individual in a lot of things. Because certainly at university, the idea was that you keep notes of everything you see, every interesting conversation you have. Yeah, sorry.
So you said you did your degree in both English and film.
Yeah.
So do you think that books have become more kind of focused on presenting it in like a film-like way? Like more, you have the scene and there's the characters, less personal perhaps in some cases? Like it's more structured like a film, like modern writing rather than traditional writing like Great Gatsby, those kind of books where it's more scenery, there's more fluency, there's more about feeling rather than what you see.
I think there's, I think a lot of the major releases, you're certainly right, tend to be sort of have one eye on film. I mean, thinking of the Harry Potter series, you can sort of tell as that went on that she was thinking, oh, this will look quite sexy on film, and I think that for stuff like Divergent, some of those, the big, and obviously Hunger Games, you can tell that they've got an eye on, this will probably sell, so what can I write that'll make a great film as much as being an interesting book. But I think that there are also authors who do sort of push, I mean, you know, David Mitchell's fantasy novels, or you know, I don't know if you call them fantasy, but they tend to embrace the sort of unique possibilities of the book form, if you like, as much as I think any old school writing has tended to do. I think there's a good mix, if you like. I mean, I write pulpy, as you like, action thrillers type stuff, which are very much in the idea that not enough books give you the really exciting experience of a lot of
James Bond.
Yeah, and a lot of the sort of thrillers these days are fairly sort of sterile. They're a bit dull, quite honest. So I sort of try and do a bit, sort of make them a bit blockbustery, as well as take advantage of the fact that you read books in a different way in terms of how you relate to characters and stuff like that. So I think, as I said, it's a bit of a combination of both.
For example, if writing a historical article, what do you think? What is more important, to concentrate on historical details or to popularize the article for the public? So that may include just maybe inventing some, or popularizing some details. What do you think? What is more important?
When do you mean as telling a story of sorts, or just kind of like
writing an article in historical context, just about some historical event? What's more important?
I'd say in that case you probably want a strong level of detail. I think. I mean, for history in particular, the people who really read those books, they want to feel like they're in the place and get a sense of the time, obviously. But equally so, what's that woman called? Wolf Hall, Hilary Mantel. Her books are very much stories as well as being histories, if you like. But, a bit of a catchphrase. But and Anthony Beaver, who writes about like Stalingrad and things like that. He writes, they're historical accounts, but he tells them like they're a story. And I think that's a good way of keeping people interested, as opposed to sort of more traditional kind of this happened and this happened on this day, which can be, to put it mildly, a bit dry. I think it is about whether in fiction or non-fiction, it's you want to get a sort of level of detail where people can feel engrossed, but also compelled enough to keep going forward. And there are plenty of historical pieces where a character's been invented to sort of lead the reader or the viewer sort of through the story, and then it's in the story details around them where they convey a sense of the historical times.
And of course, even some historical books can be written. One is more informative, but you feel boring, and the second is less informative, for example, but it is written in such a way that you can't pull your eye out of the book. That's it. That's
I guess excuse me, just that much. It's the difference between you don't want it to feel like apologies to all concerned, like homework. You're just kind of pushing on through. You want to feel like it's taking you on a bit of an adventure, or whatever it is. I think so.
But your French essays were always very entertaining.
Do you think your style changes between your writing of books and journalism, and who influenced you in your writing style?
Definitely there's a difference in terms of how I write novels, how I do my sort of journalistic work, as much just because in a novel you're effectively sort of, I mean, I write fiction obviously, so you're sort of creating, you're not only telling a story, but you're creating a sort of whole world around that story. Whereas when you're writing an article, the stuff I tend to do tends to be sort of analysis, whether it's tactics in a football game or a film review or something. You're sort of looking at what's already there, and you're telling people in sort of a concise way, bits of information, if you like. It's not. Whereas with a novel, you have to try and draw people in on a more sort of personal level, if that makes sense. in terms of, you want them to be engrossed in the story, whereas for an article, you want them to be sort of interested in the information. Does that make sense?
Yeah. and who are you influenced by from both sides?
For writing novels, it was far and away Ian Fleming, who was the Charlie knows, the guy who wrote the James Bond novels, and who I've been reading since I was that high, and that was fantastic. I'm just saying, find a lot of modern thrillers to be sort of quite sterile and boring, and while a lot of the politics of Fleming's novels are highly questionable, I think the way he writes sort of adventure and in that old sort of style where he writes as though every location is sort of brand new and exciting and different, and everything coming out that post-war period where there wasn't a lot of transatlantic travel and resources were still fairly scarce. Everything feels like it's big and insane, and it adds that kind of extra flavour to a story, which I love. And I feel these days there's a certain type of, a lot of authors can be kind of blasé. Oh, the hero went to Cairo, and that was nice, and there was an adventure there, blah blah blah. Whereas Fleming would be expounding on the pyramids and these weird villains who are planning to blow them up from within, or God knows what. And it feels like you get a texture for the place. Whereas a lot of modern novels, to me, feel like they're just kind of using location, characters, sort of plot points, right? In terms of journalism, I said one person. I know for reviews, there's a guy called Drew McWeeny who writes for HitFix, I think, who does film reviews, and he used to be Moriarty on ain'titcool.com. Have you ever heard of that? It's a sort of film site that was famous near the start of the internet, sort of leaking scripts, and it was one of the first, and they were really a big sort of fan site in terms of they weren't professionals. They were doing it because they love film and they love Star Wars, and they somehow got hold of the Phantom Menace script and probably got banned from any future LucasArts event because they did a script review of the Phantom Menace and said more or less what you would expect someone to say in a script review of the Phantom Menace. And that him and the AV Club, something like that, it's an offshoot of The Onion, which is a satirical sort of news site. The AV Club is like their pop culture kind of sister site, who pretty much pioneered reviews for sort of TV as much as anything, and analysis and stuff like that. And so yeah, I think those are probably the two mostly for being a bit, taking a slightly more analytical approach to reviewing these films and TV shows, and like Breaking Bad and Mad Men in particular. They really took off because of AV Club and another guy called Alan Secondwall, who's also at HitFix, who really got deep into what each plot is sort of thematically developing, and what the ideas spanning the whole season are, and really sort of going in depth, whereas previously reviews or anything I think tended to be kind of surface. And, so, yeah.
As a film critic, what do you look out for in films, and is there a particular genre you focus on?
Well, I think Charlie would know that I watch pretty much anything, although he had many arguments about the merits of Pedram over the years.
But he finally came around for
one film.
Okay.
Well, two, to be fair.
Small victories. Small
Take
victories.
what you can. I think for film reviews, you look at sort of Roger Ebert, who was the one who pioneered the idea that you don't necessarily have to write about film just as something that's this is good, this is bad type idea. You can sort of go into it from a personal point of view, and you can sort of try and give a sense of the experience as much as anything. and I think that's probably, I think when I read reviews, that's something I really enjoy reading, is when a reviewer has clearly got some sort of attachment to the film and can sort of convey sort of what they liked about it in a sort of more, you know, in a more personal, anecdotal sort of way. And yeah, I think certainly, yeah, just personal views. You want to avoid using sort of vague terms like good, bad, stuff like that. Right? You want to give a sense of exactly what it is that, you know, might not, like if you say you can say an action sequence is bad, or there's sort of an abundance of shaky camera, which gives you a sense of, gives the reader a sense of, you know, maybe they like that, in which case, you know, they can disregard that thing, or maybe shaky camera is the worst thing that's ever happened to the action genre. So they know to steer well clear of, you know, that particular film. So you're giving a kind of more specific criticism rather than just, you know, I thought this was crap. I thought this was great. But, you know, then you can also sort of communicate a bit of, you know, what you enjoy through there, and then, you know, it's a good way of sort of connecting to your reader, I think. You know. There was another part of that question.
Yeah, do you have a specific genre?
Bit of everything, to be honest. Maybe I think rom-coms are struggling to produce anything particularly memorable, but that's been true for quite a while. And as I say, I write action thrillers. I'm always sort of interested in what's being done there. The latest Hunger Games film is pretty great. Any interest in that? Yeah, I think comedy as well has been sort of struggling to find, for me anyway, a sort of consistent tone, if you like, to take. There's been sort of, it's been swerving between the more improvisational stuff that has tended to be the sort of Saturday Night Live alumni, and then the sort of the more gross out stuff, which, you know, is fine for a while, but when it's the only option, it can get a bit tedious for me anyway. And if you look at some of the comedies from, you know, the 80s, 70s, they tend to have a sort of, they tend to be aimed at a more sort of specific, not necessarily market, but, you know, like John Hughes had teenagers, and he sort of cases to that kind of general experience, the experience of being a teenager, and you know, the things you'd go through, and sort of heisen them for, you know, Ferris Bueller laughs all the way. And I think, yeah, so I think comedy has sort of struggled to find its equilibrium recently, whereas, you know, perhaps action films have sort of stopped it. There's no outright crap like Batman and Robin, which was also kind of entertaining crap, but, you know, it's in a so bad it's good sort of way. But yeah, they've sort of found a level where they're not exceptionally great, but they're generally pretty good. So yeah, it's interesting, you know, question to, you know, look at different genres and what they're doing in terms of, you know, how they're casing to international audiences as well, since so much of a film's gross now comes from international box office, that you can tell that they're sort of thinking they have to make these films more universal rather than being, you know, aimed specifically at an American market.
Yeah. Would you say that, as a whole, the film industry has sort of reached a plateau in terms of the content of the films? Because for the past maybe 10 years, I feel like all the movies have recycled storylines. So would you say so?
Yeah, for sort of the big sort of blockbuster films, or just films in general?
Films in general, really.
I'd say on the level of sort of the blockbuster kind of area, I would absolutely agree with you. But I think a lot of that is that the nostalgia of sort of my generation, maybe generation before, for the comic books and things like that that they grew up with, has turned into a kind of recycling in terms of it's the only person who's really producing, the only people who are really producing original blockbuster films now. You can say sort of Tarantino, Christopher Nolan with Interstellar, and maybe Scorsese, maybe occasionally, like he's not really a blockbuster director by any stretch of the imagination, but it's certainly, I think the nostalgia thing is great to an extent in that, if you like that kind of thing, it's immediately exciting when a villain or some character from a comic or a book that you've read before comes up and you've liked in that form, you get to see in the new one, but it has sort of taken over to a great extent. Whether that's true in terms of independent cinema and sort of small affair, I'm not so sure. I think that if you know where to look, there's still a bit of that nostalgia, but I think it's all channeled in fairly original ways. Like there was a really entertaining film quite recently called The Guest, which had very much a kind of Terminator-y 80s vibe to it, but it was kind of putting a slightly spoofy spin on the whole thing without sort of being overtly comedic. And it was just sort of great fun from beginning to end, a good sort of retro soundtrack, and it had that sort of slightly hammy vibe that the 80s action films did. So it kind of captured the vibe without recycling. And then there's a lot of British films recently have actually been pretty good, which is compared to when I was at CCSS. I remember the best thing that the British film industry could come up with was Sex Lives of the Potato Men, which is every bit as tragic and awful as that sounds. Whereas now there's people like Ben Wheatley, who's did Field in England, and he's got a new film coming out called High Rise, and he's done, they're all small films, but they're interesting, they're pretty original, he's got a sort of distinctive take.
What do you think of the In-Betweeners?
The films or?
The series.
I enjoy the series. I think the film is I haven't seen much of the second one, I've seen sort of clips of it. I don't think it sort of captured the same kind of anarchic spirit that made the series so much fun. But yeah, I like the series. And hopefully no one here has had that exam room experience that Will has had. Listen, when I've been to review screenings, there's kind of almost a divide between the people who go into the actual screenings with a pen and paper and are actually revising as they're watching, which to me seems like the worst way to approach it, because you surely want to get a sense of the whole experience of the film, and just enjoy it for what it is, and then on your walk home, whatever, then you can start thinking about what it means, or what you enjoyed about it, and sort of looking at it as a
complete.
Yeah. So yeah, when I'm watching the film, I just watch the film and hope it's good or enjoyable for what it is. And then afterwards, is I think the better time to be thinking about it.
Could you see one of your books becoming a film?
Probably, yeah. I mean, as I said, they're pretty trashy action films, so they're probably pretty well suited. And having grown up with the James Bond movies to a ludicrous extent, full of guns, girls, and explosions. Should they become successful enough, they could probably be translated. I try and write them so that they're first and foremost enjoyable experiences as books, because I think if you try and write a film in book form, it's going to be a sort of weird fit. So, but I think hopefully. Yes. Yep.
So when you were at CCSS, you're obviously a creative person. How did you sort out what you wanted to do in terms of the storyboard and film?
For the film studies?
Yeah.
As mentioned earlier, I'd already sort of put down some deeply terrible attempts at writing books, and the thing I actually storyboarded was a passage from one of them, which was where the hero is chased through a Japanese hotel by explosive mechanical birds, which is actually going to be, if I can get my series done, published professionally, is going to be in one of them. So sneak preview, I guess.
And it was beautifully drawn as well.
Oh, good.
Beautifully drawn.
I'm sure I got full marks from Charlie for that
Well,
one.
the senior examiner said to me, McAlpine, he's a mature student, right? I said, no, he's a very immature student. But yeah,
He's a very immature adult.
he was struck by that one, yeah.
So, what is there sort of something you're struggling with to sort of come up with an idea for a story?
It's like we have a lot of ideas. It's which one is more practical.
Oh right. Well, I suppose a main consideration would be what's the easiest one to draw if you're actually having to draw the storyboards, but also probably something that has tells a bit of a story in its own right. I suppose if there's a sort of scene that you think gets a sort of sense of a character or location, or just an interesting part of the story, then maybe think about focusing on that. And again, it sort of depends on what sort of stuff you enjoy writing about or or coming up with. But I think you don't want to just do a passage that would normally have dialogue in it. So you want to do something that has a bit of momentum to it, one way or the other. But that's probably the best answer I can come up with.
Do you think Jose Mourinho's remarks about Chelsea fans being quiet was justified?
Yes. Stamford Bridge, unfortunately, is not the most vociferous of stadiums, but that's actually true for quite a few clubs. A friend of mine is also a sports journalist, and he an Arsenal fan, and he goes to the Emirates quite a lot, and he says it's.
Do you think that's because season ticket prices are, well, at Arsenal at least, about £2,000, and actually not lower league clubs, but lower in the Premier. I'm a Hull fan, and our stadiums are is always packed with loads of fans, really loud, and our season ticket prices are about £400 compared to yours, which are about £1,200. Full of corporate, rich, and a lot of foreign fans as well. Do you think that's
it has definitely had a big effect. At Stamford Bridge as well, it's funnily enough, after Mourinho made those comments, there was sort of a big hoo-ha on various Chelsea fan sites about whether he was right to pull fans out on that. And someone actually wrote a letter to John Terry, who's the club captain, for those of you who don't follow football, saying that at Stamford Bridge in particular, there's a lot of sort of restrictions for health and safety, ostensibly, about sort of you're being allowed to stand up and where certain fans are seated and stuff like that, which also has a contributory effect. So I think you're probably right that the main gist of it is that fans are being priced out of football, and a lot of the big clubs, Chelsea I think are saying over lunch the cheapest ticket is like £47 for
The thing is that Chelsea isn't run as a business. Abramovich is a very rich man who buys players and is not that concerned about losing money as shown with Torres. Do you think that then, if it's not run as a business, then why does he have these extortionate prices? It's not as if it couldn't be changed for him. Also, season tickets are not the main source of revenue or income for football clubs anymore. It's advertisement, it's going abroad, things like that. Maybe for lower down clubs such as Hull, but for Chelsea,
Hull are doing that badly, don't understand yourself.
Currently, we're not doing great. But for Chelsea, they could just, I don't know, lower prices, spend more on advertising abroad.
I think the problem is that while Abramovich may be happy to make his big glamour signings, there's Torres, sadly, there's a big difference between sort of knowing that he's going to be losing money if he sort of drastically undercuts season tickets, compared to if he doesn't know if he brings in a big player, for example, he can they'll get shirt sales and theoretically bring different sets of fans to the club, even if the player doesn't necessarily succeed. So, I mean, it's that thing where, yeah, you know, if you wanted to, you probably could, and to a great extent it would probably be a big idea, but then equally so, Stamford Bridge generally sells out anyway, so, or more or less. So the question is, are the fans who are coming in, are they the fans that, you know, to an extent that you want, if you like? Are they the sort of core supporters, or are they the people that, you know, the people who are just coming in because it's Chelsea have now become, you know, the big global brand, as opposed to, you know, when I first started supporting them when we weren't winning anything. It was more about, you know, the joy of just, you know, the joy and the agony of, as you probably know, of getting so close and not quite crossing the finish line type stuff. But yeah, no, it's a big question, I think, in general in football anyway, about the extent to which clubs should be offering tickets for the next, you know, as much for the under 21 fans, the next generation, cheaper tickets for them, and, you know, just sort of get in that sort of core group of supporters who have been loyal for, you know, their whole lives, as opposed to exploiting the fact that that loyalty, you know, they will pay more in a lot of cases, but, you know, whether that's the right thing to do is another question entirely.
What about the creative writing part of your English course? I mean, you arrived at university being a writer already. I mean, did you get anything out of that?
I know I should be hugely complimentary.
No, not at all. I'm just honest. I mean, you cannot write again.
The thing is, when I was at university, I wrote my first 2 novels, and you get the, you know, so I had that time to think and develop my ideas, as well as having the, you know, what would be called the university experience, which you like, and for that it's invaluable. What I would, as a sort of course in and of itself, I think it depends on what level you go in on, because a lot of the creative writing stuff was certainly started out embarrassingly basic. In that I remember we had a and I don't just mean that in a sort of look at me, I'm very good at this sort of way. I mean that in that I think our first the first seminar I went to was using metaphors. You know, so come on, fair enough. There are going to be people at different levels, and that's fine. You know, everyone has to learn. I know that when I left university and I first sent out my novels, they were nowhere near good enough to be published, and it is a long-term thing. So, you know, getting to that level, and you know, you have to take the hits of being told that, you know, this isn't good enough, and that, you know, you need to learn to write more concisely, and, you know, tighter plotting and all those, you know, all those things. But as I say, I think, as I was saying to some of you earlier, in almost any sort of creative field that I've had a job in, or that sort of I've done a course, you know, towards getting jobs in, they've always said that the #1 best thing you can do now that there's YouTube, there's blogs, there's, you know, God knows what, is just put yourself out there and put your work out there. And so I did a course about getting jobs in TV, and they were saying that, you know, when you want to be a director, a writer, actor, sort of behind the scenes, the best thing you can do is just put a 3-minute thing on YouTube that has your name on it somewhere, and that you can point to when you're sending off an application and say, look, I've got this work, this is, you know, where I'm at, and it shows that you have an interest and that you're willing to actually do the work to, you know, to put yourself out there. I've never really been asked about my degree in any sort of job I've done, and a lot of it for, you know, journalism type stuff is sort of networking, whether it's online or as in, you know, as I said, doing the blogging, or just writing to editors at sites you like and saying, you know, look, I've got this idea for an article, would you be interested in taking it? And again, a lot of the time you'll just hear, you know, no, if anything at all, but that is how they recruit the main gist of their sort of freelance stuff, which will be a significant sort of percentage of the stuff you see on the site. They'll have people they know and rely on, but because journalism in particular is kind of a fading field at the moment, in that newspapers are effectively dying out and they don't know how to make a lot of money from online, then they're not really offering contracts, which is where they give you a set salary. So they will do it more on a freelance basis. So it is as much about having your work out there so that they can see that you can do good work and regular work, and to a lesser extent, but not necessarily unimportantly, that you have a following of some, to some degree, and what else I was going to say now, but also that you have the initiative to go after things, and you can produce.
Because of the increase in freelance journalism, do you think that it's become, I don't mean this in like a mean way, but do you think it's become quite a lonely career? Because you don't, obviously a lot of it's online, a lot of the communication is online now. Mm-hmm. When you write a book, you're on your own. You're not in a newsroom, you're not in an environment where there's lots of people around you. Do you get lonely? Do you
well, the straight answer is yes. You will spend a lot of time on your own. I tend to be a sort of fairly introverted type of person most of the time. I mean, when I first came to CCSS, I'm sure you both remember having had a difficult time at the school before. I was completely sort of shut inside my own head and very much wary of coming out. And it's only thanks to being taught by people like Charlie and the support of Rona and the staff here that I'm even able to talk to you guys here today, and I hope it's useful. And I think you need to be prepared for particularly if you're doing novels, which effectively a 75,000 word minimum for most novels, that you'll be spending a lot of time on your own, just typing away on a computer. If you're anything like me, probably in bed, probably eating some grossly unhealthy desserts at the time, which is the good side. But for going into actual offices, then there's a lot less of that going around. One of the guy who was in charge of the football course, which was at the Guardian, whose name is Jacob Steinberg, he said he got in just by interning, which he said is probably the best way of getting a sort of regular position at the moment. Or
we had another speaker, Hadley Freeman, and she said no one has been employed at the Guardian since 2009.
Yeah, that would really surprise me, to be honest. I mean, I should look for regular work in, and I was the head UK editor for a film site, which was an offshoot of a popular video game site called Destructoid. So he's not that high profile, but was reasonably well known as far as a news site can be. And was the head UK editor for 2.5 years of that. I'd also written for Destructoid, which is again this video game site. Done bits for Chelsea fan sites and just general football-y stuff. And in terms of finding a sort of set job at any kind of publication, not a sniff. So it wouldn't surprise me at all, but that's what the guy on the football course said, that he got his through interning. On that same measure, a friend of mine who has only just got a sort of regular job, not in an area he's interested in, but he graduated from uni at the same time I did 4 years ago, and he did a lot of those internships, and he was just used for 3 months free labour, then passed on to the next guy type thing. So it's a difficult thing, and putting yourself out there is probably the way you would have to do it, and getting that sort of backlog of work behind you to support any application or whatever you call it you want to make is probably the best way of doing it. But in terms of a surefire way to get in a newspaper office, I couldn't honestly tell you. What I would say though is that if you do have aspirations to go into a sort of creative field of some sort where freelancing or whatever is now sort of the main, funnily enough, even though out there is a pretty bad time for anyone looking for any sort of job. The good part is that while the traditional media are struggling, if you can come up with a way of doing something original through social media, online video, anything like that, then that will be a big thing for you, because, as I said, that is something that I have heard a lot about in terms of being, you know, essential to what people are looking for. And the great thing is that what I'm gradually getting around to is that while the traditional way of thinking about going into these fields is maybe closing down, there's a new way that, you know, you guys who have probably grown up with the internet your whole lives, whereas I was sort of just on the cusp when I was growing up. For you guys who are, you know, will have all the latest stuff, I'm guessing you're probably, you know, most of you are probably on social media of some form or another. This is probably a time where you guys can really do something original, which will help you really stand out in areas which are still kind of dominated by the stereotypical old white male type thing, or, you know, still dedicated their old ways of doing things. So, you know, if you have a field you want to pursue, a story you want to tell, then think not only of the story itself, but the different ways in which you can tell it. And you never know, that's probably, you know, there are so many ways of putting stuff out there now that is, you know, where one, you know, the cliche, when one door closes, another one opens. So, yes.
If journalism is kind of like dying out, it's like really hard to get jobs, then what's your motivation? Like, what motivates you? Because I know I'd definitely get demotivated if that was happening, like if I wanted to do it.
Yeah, there's there are certainly times when it's when it's difficult, because I'm not going to pretend that there isn't a fair amount of rejection in there, in terms of that you do, if you're freelancing, you do have to send out sort of constant, you know, well, not quite constant, but have regular ideas for articles and just keep on sending them out to people, you know, hoping for the best effectively. But I think that once you get some contacts, and, you know, you will eventually, you can, you know, you can find people on Twitter and get talking them through there. There are lots of, you know, again, courses you can do to meet people who are in the right fields, and you can, and then, you know, not just expensive courses, but like the Guardian ones were sort of 45 odd quid, which is, you know, for an evening with, you know, the main sports writer, the Guardian. Then there was also one about getting into TV, which had former program head of development for programs at Channel 4, and, you know, a couple of other things like that. So once you've made those contacts, then it's a lot easier to start, you know, getting more regular work. And so, yeah, it is difficult. And, you know, I'm not going to lie to you and pretend that it's going to, you know, you're going to fly out and it's going to be happiness and joys and bunnies are prancing. But once you you know, get that sort of base down there, then, yeah, and you're sort of doing something you love, then, you know, it gets a lot easier and a lot more fun, I think. So it's, you know, about pushing through that initial barrier, I think, and then fingers crossed it'll all work out nicely in the end.
I think that's a highly inspirational note to perhaps wind down on, unless anyone's got any really burning question they want to put to Xander. It's interesting because, as I said, Hadley sat here saying virtually the same thing. And although she didn't envy the life of the freelance, she was saying that the genuinely creative opportunities that freelance gives you is still something that she was kind of hankering for almost.
I mean, as I said, it is absolutely worth considering that, you know, the old forms may be going away, but there are so many new ways of getting your work out there. You won't make a lot of money from them, you know, hardly any at first, but you can still, you know, start somewhere. Like one of the football sites, or one of the sites I wrote some football stuff early on, which was effectively just to, you know, build up some sort of backlog, was this place called What Culture, which is, I'll be honest, it's a terrible site. And it's a lot of that sort of top 10 clickbaity type stuff, whereas, you know, top 10 reasons Fernando Torres failed at Chelsea, which was the easiest article I have ever written in my life. Yeah. But yeah, they'll pay you. They make ACP per 1,000 views, and they'll give you 40p, which is, it is nothing effectively, but an article that isn't that popular should get about 3,000, and the big ones will get hundreds of thousands. So if you can get an idea that will kind of stick, then
how do you get in contact with those sort of
those guys? It is pretty much just about, if you have an idea, you can submit it, and they'll say, go ahead. Then it's pretty much on the site that they want readers to, write in and produce ideas. I think BuzzFeed do a bit of that as well. There's certainly some of those types of sites that just rely on having a constant turnover, tend to be willing to, give their writers something back, and don't tend to be like too fussy in terms of putting up barriers between you getting in touch with them. Yes, I mean, as I said, and well, of course, and then if you're doing a novel, then or any kind of short story writing, anything, then of course there's self-publishing now, which a great amount of which does come down to how good you are publicising yourself, and you want to sort of get in touch with the major sort of blog book reviewers. There's a site called Goodreads where you can submit your work and get it read. And there are places you can go to publicise your work. So it's difficult, but there are opportunities there. It's just about sort of wheeling your way through and finding the right ideas, the right things, and maybe mixing the stuff that's just building up the backlog with the stuff that you really want to do, with, which you may have. Well, you probably will have to do for free to a fair extent, but there are certainly ways that you can get paid for this stuff, even if it's difficult. And then hopefully eventually, then once you guys are out of here or out of uni, then it'll be a slightly better situation, or there'll be more reliable opportunities for you guys. But
I think I was recently at a talk that Adam and Jogi, he wrote a tackle blog, and he's now working with J.J. Abrams and all that kind of stuff. And the point he kept making is the film industry specifically, but I'd say the same applies for all the creative industries, including games. What they need is writers. You might get treated really badly, you might get rejected, but they need writers like they need oil, because there just is not the writing out there. They really, really need it. So it's people like Xander who are going to be the oil supply of the future.
Always want to give it a shake. But again, as I said, just if you're gonna, if you want to do something in writing, any sort of TV, anything like that, then at the moment you're around loads of friends. When you're at uni, you'll have societies and stuff like that. Take advantage of it. You've all got camera phones. You can shoot a 3-minute thing to put on YouTube in 5 minutes. Well, not really in a day. But what I mean is that it doesn't take long, and it does mean that you have to coordinate your mates instead of letting them go out and drink themselves into oblivion that night. But effectively that's a pretty that's part of the job anyway, I think. So now is, if you're going to get started, you don't necessarily have to know exactly what you want, and God knows I've, as Charlie said, wavered between a few different, plenty of different ideas. But it's a great time to, while you're at school or at uni, when you've got and there are so many resources available to you to do to make these things, to take advantage of that, really. And I'm sure Charlie will teach you how to be an auteur in your own right.
Maybe not. I think that's grand, unless anyone has any burning question. I'd just like to thank Xander for giving us such an interesting insight.